Hi, I'm Mia. I'm 29 years old, and I recently went through a divorce from my husband Fred a few months ago. Fred and I first met in college, where we shared a few classes and often sat together. We hit it off and soon found ourselves falling in love. However, there was a challenge in our relationship. Fred's mother, Holly, she seemed to dislike me for some unknown reason and made efforts to come between Fred and me. I used to talk to Fred about how uncomfortable his mother's behavior made me, but he never took any action. He found it hard to stand up to her because she was all he had while growing up. So I decided to let it slide and endure her constant criticism. She loved finding fault in everything I did, even things she didn't know about. I suspected Fred was sharing details with her, which only fueled our arguments. After a lot of fighting, Fred agreed to stop sharing personal information about me with his mother. We dated for around 3 years before tying the knot. Despite Holly's attempts to sway Fred, our bond remained strong. We distanced ourselves from her for a while. During that period, both of us scored promotions at work. Although I earned slightly more, we divided our expenses 60/40, with me covering the larger share. While our relationship flourished, I felt the need to pursue a hobby for personal fulfillment. Design had always intrigued me, so I decided to explore graphic design, something I could do from home. Without Fred's knowledge, I invested in courses and equipment, keeping my project a secret. I preferred keeping my ventures private as not all of them panned out. The only person I confided in was my best friend Jess. I've picked up a new interest. Another one of your hobbies you'll ditch soon. I hope not. I aim to make good money from it. Really? Finally getting paid for a hobby? Yes, actually, I'm delving into graphic design. Great choice. It's a lucrative field. I've taken some courses and want to start freelancing. I might start a business. Starting solo might not be my style. I was thinking of joining a firm. Nah, that's too routine for you. I have friends starting businesses. You could design their logos and websites. That sounds fantastic. The people Jess introduced me to were wealthy risk-takers willing to invest in a beginner like me. Despite my lack of experience, they appreciated my work and connected me with more clients. Gradually, my side hustle became a significant source of income, easing our financial strain. I started saving to surprise Fred with something special, but whenever I wanted to discuss it, he seemed distant. His behavior raised concerns, but he avoided discussing it. The first sign of trouble was when he confessed to spending all his earnings on investments soon after payday. We argued, but we managed to navigate through that month. I worked extra hours to make ends meet, hoping things would improve. But the following month, Fred repeated the same mistake, leaving me furious. How could he squander his money so recklessly? I lashed out in frustration, later regretting my harsh words. I hoped it would prompt him to be more responsible. Yet when it happened again the next month, I felt drained. Despite my efforts, Fred's financial habits persisted. My graphic design gig became our main source of income. But when Fred couldn't contribute for the third month in a row, I reached my breaking point. How could you let this happen again? Haven't you learned anything? I'm just trying to maximize returns, but I messed up. Messed up? Losing your entire paycheck isn't a small mistake. You've got your money though, right? We'll handle things as usual. No, I'm done. I won't cover for you this month. Figure out your own expenses. What? You can't do that. And you can't gamble away everything you earn. But here we are. So what? I'm supposed to go hungry and take public transport. We'll have food at home, but you'll have to use public transport since you can't pay for gas. So you want me to look poor? Taking public transport doesn't define your status. Stop acting entitled. If you wanted to drive, maybe you should have thought about your gambling habits. You're selfish and heartless. How could you do this to your husband? What about what you're doing to me? I've been working extra hours to cover for your losses. Can't you see things from my perspective? You have no perspective worth considering. I'm out. I can't deal with you right now. After Fred stormed off, I couldn't understand his behavior. It was then I started suspecting Holly's involvement. While Fred was away, I decided to investigate. Since he had logged into his bank account on my laptop and saved the password, it wasn't hard to access it. To my surprise, he had plenty of money in his account, and his transactions seemed normal. I was puzzled. Why was he hiding money from me? Why the lies? Feeling confused, I checked his messages for answers. The first person I noticed he had texted was his mom, discussing our recent argument. He told her I'd lashed out because he wouldn't give me money, and Holly responded with an "I told you so." It confirmed my suspicions that she was influencing him. She'd always harbored animosity toward me, but I didn't realize the extent of it until now. As I scrolled through their messages, I discovered more. Holly had bombarded Fred with texts about me, highlighting my supposed flaws like being money-driven and only with him for his wealth. Ironically, I was the main breadwinner in our household. It was clear she was getting to Fred. He started texting her about trivial things that annoyed him about me, and she only fueled his complaints. It explained why Fred was growing distant. Eventually, they plotted to cut me off financially. Initially, Fred resisted, but Holly's encouragement wore him down. 2 months ago, he went through with it. He informed Holly about my extra work hours 1 month and our subsequent argument the next, which only worsened things. I was devastated by what I discovered. Unsure of what to do, I sought solace at my best friend Jess's house. She's always been my go-to person in tough times, no matter the hour. Showing up unannounced at 11:30 p.m. understandably alarmed her. After letting me in and settling me with a glass of wine, she asked what had happened. "So spill the beans. What's got you so worked up?" "I've just uncovered some unsettling things, and I'm at a loss for what to do." "Oh, is this about Holly and Fred?" "Yeah. You remember how Fred's been throwing away his money on those sketchy investments for the past couple of months?" "Yeah, it was bizarre." "Did he do it again?" "Yes and no." "What do you mean?" "He's had his money all along but refused to give me any." "What? That makes no sense. You've been shouldering most of the household expenses, right?" "Exactly. That's what's so baffling about his behavior." "Is Holly pulling the strings in this?" "Of course. She's been texting him about my flaws for a while and even persuaded him to stop supporting me. And she's clueless about your income too." "But what about Fred? Shouldn't he realize how much you contribute?" "Apparently not. I'm not sure how to handle this. It's pretty obvious though, right? Cut off this support, then divorce him when he's down. Isn't that a bit harsh, Mia?" "He didn't think about that." "Why are you worried?" "You know what? You're exhausted. Sleep on it, and we'll talk more tomorrow." Jess was spot on. I was utterly drained, both mentally and physically. The events of the day had taken their toll, and all I craved was sleep. Luckily, it was the weekend the next day. Jess and I put on one of our favorite movies, and soon we drifted off. The following morning, we decided to escape from our troubles and indulge in a day of relaxation. We stayed in bed, binge-watching movies and shows, cooking delicious meals, and cherishing each other's company. Despite my efforts to push away thoughts of the previous day, they lingered. I knew I needed this time to process everything. However, that evening my phone rang. Seeing Holly's name on the caller ID made my heart race. Unsure whether to answer, Jess encouraged me to take the call. With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello, Holly. You're despicable." "Whoa, hold on. What's this about?" "You're just after my son's money, aren't you?" "Excuse me? Is that why you cut off his expenses?" "No, he's been squandering his money on those foolish investments. I can't keep supporting his reckless behavior." "Well, that was all a test." "A test? I wanted to show Fred that you're only with him for his wealth, and you proved my point. Don't you think you've crossed a line meddling in our marriage? Who are you to judge me when you're the one chasing wealth?" "Fine. I don't want my son's marriage to fail. What do you suggest we do to fix things?" "I want you and Fred to split everything 50-50ths. Everything." "Are you serious?" "Yes. Let's see how long you can handle it. I'll draft a contract for both of you. Once signed, you must stick to it." "Fine. If Fred agrees, we'll do it. I want a copy of that contract." "Agreed. We'll discuss further on Tuesday." I couldn't believe this was the state of my marriage, and anger surged within me. How dare Holly accuse me of being a gold digger? And how could Fred tolerate it? I'd supported him through everything, even his mistakes and lies. When I shared the call with Jess, she smiled, helping me see the silver lining. Splitting everything evenly meant Fred would have to shoulder his share of our major expenses. He had no idea about my side hustle, which I kept secret until it gained momentum. I wanted to surprise him with its success and buy him something extravagant. Knowing I had a solid backup plan brought me relief in that moment. Tuesday arrived sooner than expected. Jess joined me after we finished work, eager to witness the unfolding events. Upon our return home, we found Holly and Fred already there. Fred was preoccupied with his phone, while Holly sat with the lawyer, tweaking what seemed to be the contract on his laptop. Holly barely acknowledged me, but Fred looked visibly nervous. He tried to signal for us to talk privately in the kitchen, but I brushed him off. Instead, I approached Holly and requested to review the contract. The lawyer obliged, and as I suspected, it outlined an equal split of everything, with the added clause of no financial assistance between us. I agreed and signed the document. It didn't take long before Fred began facing challenges. At first, Fred and I kept our distance, both unwilling to engage with someone who seemed intent on my suffering. But when you share a living space, avoiding conversation is nearly impossible. Fred made efforts to bridge the gap between us, but I initially brushed him off. Eventually, his persistence wore me down, and I reluctantly started talking to him. "Can we please talk? This silent treatment is getting us nowhere." "What exactly do you want me to say, Fred?" "I don't know, but I miss us." "Do you? Then why agree to a contract dividing our finances? I wanted to see if you were truly invested in our relationship. Your mother has caused so many issues between us, yet you still believe her. Is this really the best solution?" "Don't speak ill of my mother. And what money do you think I need from you?" "Look, I don't want confrontation. I'm trying to mend things. There won't be any progress until that contract is gone. It's only been 2 weeks since we signed it. I have yet to see any proof that you're not just in it for the money. You're impossible, you know that? Listen, if you're struggling financially, tell me. I'll help. But wouldn't that violate the contract? Besides, I don't want to be accused of breaking it. Why are you making this so hard? You're the one who created this mess. Can't we just be civil?" Fine. I could see Fred wrestling with conflicting influences, the beliefs instilled by Holly versus his original values. The Fred I married would never have made such foolish decisions that could harm me. Yet, here he was, obedient to every word from his mother, a decision he'd come to regret. Thankfully, I'd already paid off our major loans that month, leaving Fred in a bind the following month. With my shares settled, I enjoyed financial freedom. I indulged in splurges, treating myself and Jess to lavish dinners, fine wines, museum visits, and cozy cafes, documenting our adventures on social media. Despite inviting Fred to join us multiple times, he always declined due to his financial struggles. Meanwhile, my graphic design side hustle flourished, allowing me to reduce my hours at my day job and even contemplate quitting altogether. Fred's difficulties were evident, even in our groceries. His side of the pantry and fridge often remained empty. While part of me felt sympathy, I couldn't forget that he brought this upon himself. Later, Holly showed up at our doorstep. Jess and I had just returned, so her presence caught me off guard. "Hey Holly, what brings you here?" "Don't act innocent. I know what you've been up to, and I'm calling the cops." "Pardon me? What are you talking about?" "You've been robbing Fred, haven't you?" "Why on earth would I do that?" "Because you're seeking revenge. You're not happy about that contract he made you sign. My poor son has been struggling all month while you're out living it up on his dime. Firstly, your son doesn't have any money for me to steal. Yes, I despise the contract, but let's not forget who's truly responsible for it. You're the one who pressured us into signing it, and now your son is suffering because of it, you liar. I'll be dialing the police right now." "Go ahead. I haven't taken a penny from your son." "How do you have so much money then? Your job doesn't pay that much more than Fred's, and he mentioned you've cut back on hours." "I have another business on the side, a graphic design venture. I intended to surprise Fred with it until you filled his head with nonsense. You started a business without telling me. I plan to buy you a car with the money I earned. How much do you make from it?" "More than you think. You lied. I didn't do anything wrong. I was trying to do something nice, and you ruined it. Since you care so much about your son, maybe you should support him." I handed divorce papers to Fred, which I filed right after signing the contract and kept until now. Fred looked shocked, but I was indifferent. While Holly would normally rejoice at the sight of the papers, she seemed furious instead. I informed them I'd be moving out in 3 weeks and would continue to split the remaining loan payments, but that was all. Fred pleaded with me, but I reminded him it was his doing. It's been a few months since everything unfolded, and I can happily say I'm free from that toxic relationship. Holly tried to contest the divorce, but with our assets separated by the contract, there was little for Fred to gain. In fact, he ended up losing more money, struggling to keep up with the mortgage payments. We sold the house, and he moved back in with his mother. Meanwhile, my life has taken a positive turn. My business is thriving, and I've had the opportunity to collaborate with major brands. It's been a blissful and fulfilling time for me. I'm grateful I had something to rely on, or I might have ended up in Fred's situation. I hope he learns from this experience, but ultimately, it's not my concern.
Your husband, John, is cheating on you. A college girl suddenly appeared in front of me and dropped this bombshell. My mind went completely blank. She showed me a photo of John, my husband, happily entering a hotel with another woman. How could he betray me like this while I'm in my final month of pregnancy? I will never forgive him. I'll make sure that smile in the photo disappears forever. My name is Charlotte. I'm 25 years old. Before I got married, I was a news anchor at a local TV station. John, my husband, is 5 years older than me. He's a businessman I met when I went to cover a story at his company. He approached me so passionately that we ended up getting married less than a year after we started dating. I had planned to continue working after marriage, but John was strongly against it once we got engaged. Being out of sync is the first step to divorce. And being an anchor is a dangerous job since you're in the public eye. He said things like that, and I had my own concerns as well. So I ended up quitting my job at the TV station when we got married. I got pregnant easily during our first year of marriage, and now I'm enjoying a peaceful pregnancy. But I'm off. I'll be late again today. Okay, take care. Do your best at work. Charlotte, what's your plan for today? Today, I'm going grocery shopping, and I also want to take the train and go check out some baby stuff at the mall. Our usual peaceful morning exchange. But when John heard my casual plans, his face suddenly tightened. The mall. And you're taking the train. Walking in downtown. Yeah. I need to get this stuff done before the baby comes, or it'll be more difficult later. No way. It's too dangerous. The mall is right by my office, so I'll get everything for you. But I want to pick things out myself. I expressed my frustration, but John grabbed my shoulders with an even sterner look on his face. Listen, Charlotte, you're not just responsible for yourself anymore. You need to take this more seriously. You can order groceries online. It's safer if you don't leave the house. But pregnant women are supposed to stay active. Seeing I wasn't backing down, John let out a deep sigh. Why can't you understand that I'm worried about you? You can move around in the house, can't you? Fine, I won't go out today, but you should hurry, or you'll be late. I'm glad you understand. And remember, I'll know right away if you leave the house, thanks to the cameras in every room. Okay, see you. When I gave in, John's expression softened, and he left for work, but I think his protectiveness has gone too far. Since I got pregnant, he's installed cameras all over the house. Apparently, he watches everything on his smartphone. Once, I get fed up and turned the cameras off. He immediately called me in fury. He demanded to know if I was home, and when I said I was, he shouted at me to turn the cameras back on right away. John's excessive protectiveness and worrying were starting to feel abnormal. I need to talk to him. I can't keep living like this. It's suffocating. The cameras didn't pick up audio, so I sighed deeply and muttered to myself after seeing John off. Besides his overprotectiveness, something else had been bothering me. Charlotte, I've got another dinner with a client tomorrow, so I'll be late again. What, again? Do these dinners really happen that often? They do. You might find it surprising since you only worked in TV, but I'm actually on the lighter side compared to others. John, who had come home late and was relaxing while watching TV, stretched lazily and said, It's tough being a responsible adult working at a reputable company, you know. His tone, as if implying that my previous job was somehow less legitimate, annoyed me, but there was something I needed to confirm. Hey, you're not going to tell me it's not covered by expenses again, are you? Oh yay. It's another one of those out-of-pocket dinners, so I'm a bit short on cash. Can you cover me? John extended his hand, acting as if he just remembered. I sighed. John, you've already spent a lot on dining this month. Are you sure this is okay with the baby coming soon? It's fine. These are the kinds of things that lead to promotions down the line. Soon I'll be making so much that these expenses won't even matter. Though I had my doubts, I pulled out $100 from my wallet and handed it to him. John, however, chuckled in disbelief. Come on, I'm not dining at a family restaurant here. Tomorrow's dinner is at a high-end place. I need at least $500. What? You're going to such an expensive place for work, and you have to pay for it yourself. This is ridiculous. You should really complain to the company. Stop it. Are you trying to embarrass me? This is normal for any company. If you say something, you'll just come off as clueless and make me look bad. With that, John grabbed $500 from the wallet where I kept our household budget and stuffed it into his own. That's a month's worth of groceries and other expenses. How am I going to make up for this? Even with my pregnant belly, I couldn't shake off my growing unease. Okay, I think I have everything I need. I had been preparing to stay at my parents' house for the delivery, as my due date was approaching. It would be a long stay, and I felt relieved that I wouldn't have to endure being monitored by the cameras for a while. But at the same time, I was worried about leaving John alone. Lately, he hadn't been coming home before midnight. Always out for client dinners or drinks, and on weekends. He claimed there was always some urgent issue that required him to go into work. It was clearly strange. Is he hiding something? Is there a reason he doesn't want to come home? Once that thought crossed my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about it. John. Could he be cheating? It would explain all these mysterious dinner meetings. No, I want to believe in him, but what if? I couldn't leave for my parents' house with all these unresolved doubts. So I decided to take action. First, I would check his belongings. Hey, I'm home. I'm exhausted, but it's all for the sake of our baby. Right, good job. Let me take your bag. Go take a nice, long shower to relax. John came home late again, making a show of how hard he'd been working for the family. I took his bag and immediately began checking through it. I searched carefully, looking for anything out of the ordinary. When I opened his wallet, I was shocked to find a motel rewards card. What is this? Not only that, but the card had accumulated a significant amount of points. It was obvious he hadn't gone to the motel with me. This was undeniable proof of betrayal. What the hell are you doing? I had been frozen in place, staring at the rewards card in disbelief, and didn't notice John had come out of the shower. Did you go through my bag? How could you do something so disgraceful? Disgraceful? Who's the one being disgraceful here? What is this motel rewards card? I shoved a card in his face, my anger boiling over. John's eyes darted around nervously as he stammered. It's a motel rewards card, isn't it? Who have you been going there with? Is that why you've had so many late-night dinners and weekend work shifts lately? You've been meeting another woman, haven't you? I unleashed all my pent-up frustration and suspicions. John leaned forward defensively. What nonsense are you spouting? That rewards card belongs to a senior staff member at work. He gave it to me because he had too many points. But seriously, rifling through someone's belongings, that's low. As if a senior staff member would give you something like this. Stop with the pathetic excuses and admit your mistake. I pressed him further, but John just sighed dramatically, dragging it out for effect. Why do you always jump to such ridiculous conclusions? Even if I were going to motels with some other woman, do you have any proof? Just having a rewards card isn't enough to convince a lawyer. It's not about convincing a lawyer. The fact that you have this card at all. My confidence wavered for just a second, and John, who had been flustered earlier, now saw an opportunity and quickly switched to playing the victim. So you were freaking out without any proof, while your imagination is running wild. Here I am, working so hard to support our family because I'm going to be a dad soon. And this is what I get. How depressing. Seeing that I wasn't responding, John smirked, thinking he'd won. Oh yay, by the way, I've got another dinner with a client tomorrow night, so I'll be home late again. And since you've been going through my stuff, I'll help myself to some of our money. Wait, there's no room in the budget this month. We're still far from payday. Yay. Well, I'm the one earning the money, aren't I? It's not fair that you get to control all the cash when she doesn't even work. I need it for work, so if the budget's in the red, you should find a way to make it black. Anyway, I'm taking the money. John stormed out of the room, leaving me sitting there, unable to move. I was furious. There's no doubt in my mind now. All those dinners, drinks, and weekend work shifts were just an excuse to meet another woman. The rewards card is my proof. And he's been using up our family's household budget just to fund his playtime. I won't let him get away with it. He deceived me, and he'll pay for it. But as of now, I didn't have any concrete way to get solid proof. Sure, I'd researched online, and it seemed a motel rewards card alone wouldn't be enough evidence in court. I didn't even know who he was going to the motel with. And now that John knew I was suspicious, he'd be even more careful, probably making sure no traces were left behind. I was certain John was cheating, and I also realized that the cameras weren't just for his worry about me, they were to keep an eye on me. He must be ready to cancel his secret meetings the moment he notices me acting suspicious. I had no money to hire a detective, as John had already depleted all my savings. If only I could work. I even started feeling regret about being pregnant, and the thought of it made me sink into self-loathing. I needed to do something, anything, to clear my mind. I'm sure it's fine if I just clean the entryway for a bit. I decided to move around and get some fresh air. With a broom and dustpan in hand, I stepped outside the front door. John would not suspect anything if I just stayed around the house for a short while. I probably had no more than 30 minutes to be outside. I couldn't turn off the surveillance cameras either. That would raise suspicion. As I swept the front porch, I tried to think of a way to sneak around this time limit. Should I ask my parents for money to hire a private investigator? But I don't want to worry them. The thought of my parents, eagerly awaiting the birth of their grandchild, made me feel hollow inside. Tears welled up, but I swallowed them and kept sweeping mindlessly. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me, and someone called out, Are you Charlotte? Yes, I am. Surprised, I turned around to see a young woman standing there, looking serious. My name is Mia. I'm a 20-year-old college student, and, what would a college girl want with me? I didn't recognize her. As I tried to figure out who she was, Mia, as she introduced herself, held out her smartphone. I need you to look at this picture. A picture? What do you mean? I leaned in to see the screen. I was shocked. How? Why do you have this? When I looked at Mia in surprise, she gave a firm nod. I thought you might need it. A strange college girl stood before me. I didn't know who she was or what her intentions were, but at that moment, those details felt insignificant. This was a golden opportunity. Now I could finally hold that betrayer John accountable. I was sure of it. I'm getting nervous about going to a college girl's place. This is my first time inviting a guy over, so I'm nervous too. Hearing their giddy voices coming closer made me want to scream, but I held it in. That weekend, John had told me he was going on a business trip. He said he'd be gone over the weekend and would head straight to work on Monday from his trip. I already knew it was a complete lie. And now, right in front of me, I watch as John, all excited, prepared to enter his lover's apartment. It made me ashamed of myself for ever marrying him. But there was no use wallowing in regret. I wouldn't be able to move forward. Hesitating wasn't in my nature. That's why I was crouched here, hidden in the shadows outside John's mistress's apartment. So, John, has your wife gone back to her parents' house yet? Yeah, she said she's heading back at the start of the week. With that huge belly, she should have gone sooner. That's so mean. If your wife heard you, she'd cry. Poor thing. Let her cry. You're so sweet, Amelia. The unbearable conversation between the two finally pushed me over the edge. Just as John and Amelia were about to enter the apartment, I stepped out from the shadows and called out to them. I won't cry. I'd never shed a tear for such a pathetic excuse of a husband. Hearing my voice ring out, the two turned around in shock. Charlotte, what are you doing here? No way. She's really here. How did? They were both clearly stunned, having never expected me to appear. John, wide-eyed, quickly put distance between himself and his mistress, who had been clinging to him. What are you doing out of the house? You said you weren't feeling well or something today. That's right. I picked up on your constant lying, so I decided to follow suit. I feel perfectly fine, actually. John always kept an eye on me through the surveillance cameras at home. So this morning, I had pretended to feel unwell, lying in bed next to him, claiming I couldn't get up. Once John left the bedroom to get ready for work, I stuffed some cushions under the blanket to make it look like I was still in bed, and hid in the closet. John always checked the surveillance cameras after arriving at the office. During the short window of time while he was commuting, I rushed to gather my things and sneak out of the house. With my large pregnant belly, I then made my way here to wait for him in front of his mistress's apartment. I thought to myself, I must be one of the most proactive pregnant women out there. As I explained my little escape act, John looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't forget to let his anger boil over. Such a sneaky move. I can't believe it. What the hell are you doing, Charlotte? Don't you have any shame? I could say the exact same thing to you. I can't believe you. You're a man in your 30s, with a wife about to give birth, and you're sneaking into a college girl's apartment. You're the shameless one. I shouted back at him. John, now blushing furiously, muttered no under his breath. But Amelia, who was standing beside him, just smirked down at me. Wow, you're really desperate, huh? How do you even know where I live? Are you stalking me? This is seriously creepy. Maybe I should sue you. I couldn't believe the nerve of this girl grinning as she stood before a man's wife, right after he'd cheated. But it wasn't my job to explain how I knew her address. I'm the one who told Charlotte where Amelia lives. Amelia's voice caught in her throat as a shadow emerged from behind me. Mia, why are you here with John's wife? Yes, the college girl who had approached me while I was cleaning the front porch was none other than Amelia's friend, Mia. I couldn't stand you bragging anymore. You've been acting like what you're doing isn't completely immoral. I was sick of it, so I told Charlotte everything. Amelia was visibly shaken by Mia's blunt explanation, and started to raise her voice. "But how did you even know that John was coming to my place today? Are you stalking me too, Mia? This is terrifying. I'm going to sue you both." Mia let out a calm sigh in the face of Amelia's hysteria. "Come on, Amelia. You posted on social media about your boyfriend coming over for the first time today. If you didn't want anyone to find out, maybe you shouldn't have bragged about it online." "Well, sure, I posted, but it was just for fun. Like a little bragging, you know. But actually bringing his wife to my place is seriously messed up. What's messed up is you, Amelia. And let's not forget, you didn't just post today. Every time you went to a motel with John, you uploaded pictures of the two of you lying in bed together. I've taken screenshots of every single one, and I've already given them to Charlotte as evidence. The photo Mia had shown me the day we first met was one of the pictures Amelia had posted on social media. It showed her with John, complete with a location tag, making it irrefutable evidence of John's infidelity. Upon hearing this, the one who panicked was John, who had been standing there dumbfounded until now. "Amelia, why would you post something like that on social media? Now I might have to pay compensation in the divorce trial." "Oh, so now you're admitting that what you've done could lead to compensation in a divorce trial. Just a little while ago, you were frantically denying it when I found that rewards card." I smiled sweetly. John, now desperate, put on a pitiful expression. "No, you don't get it. This is your fault too. You wanted to give birth near your parents' house, and I knew I'd be lonely, so I found someone to keep me company, that's all. Try telling that in court." "What do you mean it's my fault? That's ridiculous. Just give it up," I shouted, and John trembled with fear. Next to him, Amelia crossed her arms and pouted. "What's with the attitude? Just because you used to be a news anchor, you think you're all that? I'm not acting all that. I'm simply stating what's right. It's the way you talk. You used to be a news anchor, but now you're just an unemployed middle-aged woman. You're probably just jealous of me, a young and beautiful 20-year-old. What are you talking about? You're envious of my market value, aren't you? That's right. I'm more valuable and adored than most women in this world. And what makes you so sure of that? The fact that I could steal your husband. That proves my value. I beat you, which means I'm more valuable than any former female anchor. Who cares about divorce settlements? I'm feeling great, like hell you have any value." It was Mia who shouted and tried to lunge at Amelia in a rage. "You think you're more valuable than my favorite person just because you're young? Don't make me laugh." "Oh yeah, Mia, you were a fan of Charlotte, right? I don't get it. What's so great about this middle-aged woman? Of course you wouldn't understand Charlotte's greatness, Amelia. She graduated from an elite university, won beauty pageants, and had such a commanding presence that she became popular nationwide, not just in local areas. You can't even begin to compare to her." I felt slightly embarrassed as I held Mia back, trying to stop her from attacking Amelia. Though I had already retired, I did spend years working hard as a popular news anchor, juggling a packed schedule. I had my own local show here, and it was well received. But that wasn't all. As Mia said, I often reported news from this region on a morning show broadcast out of New York. My interactions with the New York hosts became a hit, and I received fan letters from all over the country. I had even been scouted by agencies representing freelance anchors more than once. Even now, when I walk around town, people sometimes recognize me and say they were fans of mine. Mia had been one of those people, apparently. She had come to my house to hand over the incriminating photos because she couldn't stand hearing her college friend Amelia brag about stealing the husband of her favorite anchor, Charlotte, to anyone who would listen. Incidentally, Mia had originally learned where I lived from Amelia, and Amelia learned from John. I couldn't help but wonder about how poorly these two handled personal information, though expecting ethics from them seemed futile at this point. Amelia, everyone's disgusted by what you did. Huh, why would anyone be disgusted? They should be impressed. Amelia, still refusing to reflect on her actions, snapped at Mia. Mia just stared at her, exasperated. That's exactly the problem. Everyone at the university knows how messed up you are. Actually, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't know, even outside the university. Especially the guys, they're all careful to stay away from you. What? No way. You've ruined my whole plan. First, I was going to raise my value by stealing Charlotte's husband, and then I'd get myself a young, handsome boyfriend. You shouldn't have posted about stealing someone's husband on social media. But if I didn't brag on social media, how would people know my worth? As I listened to the back and forth between the two college girls, John suddenly snapped out of his daze and turned angrily toward Amelia. Wait, Amelia, what did you just say? You said I was the love of your life. What about all that? Like I'd ever mean that about a man in his 30s. Come on, a guy in his 30s should just go back to their wives in their 30s. You're useless to me now. And you, woman in her 30s, just take this man in his 30s home and stop making a fuss. I'm done with him. Seeing such incredible stupidity in front of me, I suddenly felt calm. A woman in her 30s, so you keep saying. You do realize that's you in 5 years, right? Are you sure about this? When I calmly asked her that question, Amelia nodded triumphantly. That means I still have 5 years before I become a middle-aged woman, right? Plenty of time. I'll date a good guy while I'm young, get married, get pregnant, and wait, hold on. 5 years is coming around faster than I thought. Amelia, who had been counting on her fingers, stopped dead in her tracks after realizing she would be following the same path I had when I was 20 years old. A few years as an adult go by in the blink of an eye. If you wanted a normal, happy marriage, you wouldn't have had time to steal someone's husband while you were still in school and get involved in a divorce trial with compensation claims. Wait, hold on. I can't deal with compensation from the divorce trial. Don't ask for it. I gave John back, didn't I? Clearly flustered, Amelia seemed to have been under the delusion that her youth would last forever. It's not enough to just casually hand John back. My family is in ruins because of you. You will take responsibility for that, I promise. As I glared at her, Amelia finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation and began trembling. And you too, John. I turned to John, who was standing next to Amelia, still in a daze. He jumped in surprise, showing yet again how completely irresponsible he was. At this point, I had to bring this situation to a proper conclusion. John, you hurt me deeply. Divorce is a given. But I'm hiring a top-notch lawyer, and I'm going to claim as much compensation as possible in the divorce trial. No amount of money could heal the pain I felt, but it was essential to at least receive some financial compensation for what I had endured. Unaware of how I felt, John suddenly started laughing smugly. Het Charlotte, you're so desperate. Well, I did make you quit your job when we got married, didn't I? You'll never go back to being the glamorous news anchor you once were. You're just as dependent on my money as I am. We're both in the same boat. Serves you right. His shamelessness was beyond belief. Now that he was cornered, He wanted to drag me down into the same pit of financial insecurity. Too bad for you. I've actually been planning for my future. When I smiled and said that, John laughed even harder, mocking me. Yeah, right. How's that gonna work? You're a jobless pregnant woman about to get divorced. You must be freaking out about how you'll survive. If you just kept quiet and turned a blind eye to my little fling, you could have kept living an easy life. Don't kid yourself. There's no way I could live a life good enough to justify ignoring such a terrible betrayal. Stop pretending you're not scared. You must regret quitting your job as an anchor for me, don't you? I've always had freelance news agencies asking me to come back, so I'm not worried. But John, are you sure you'll be okay? John, dumbfounded by my retort, just stared at me, so I began calmly explaining. You've been living quite a luxurious lifestyle on your own, but your income isn't that high, right? I've been covering the difference with the savings I had before we got married. And I plan to add that to my compensation claim in the divorce trial. What do you think will happen then? Wait, I've been living lavishly. Yes, spending more than your income allowed on dining out. Or should I say, those were probably dates with Amelia. In any case, you barely have any savings of your own. John was utterly shocked, clearly unaware of how much he had been spending on his lifestyle. It was frustrating to think that I had been depleting my savings to support this man. I might not have savings, but neither do you. It'll be tough even as a freelance announcer, won't it? You don't have any guaranteed income. You must be desperate, counting on my compensation from the divorce trial. Desperately trying to pull me down to his level, John's attempts were futile, and I shut him down with ease. Nope, not at all. I've been fortunate enough to receive offers not just as a news anchor, but for magazine columns and even modeling work. After the baby's born, I plan to start working. What? Columns? Modeling? Is Charlotte really that popular? Seeing John's astonishment, Mia, who had always been my fan, was even more shocked. How do you, her husband, not know this? Charlotte's popularity goes beyond just being a news anchor. Charlotte, no offense, but why did you marry a man like him? Well, when I was working as an anchor, I had such a hectic schedule. And during that time, he kept pestering me, and I just gave in. I must have been so exhausted, my judgment was clouded. You were super busy with the news, variety shows, and special programs. I'm thrilled at the thought of seeing you on TV again. As Mia and I continued talking, it seemed John had a sudden change of heart. He abruptly threw himself at my feet. Charlotte, please, let me be your manager. I'll work hard and do anything for you. Are you kidding me? John, we're getting a divorce. There are no other options. You should make up for the compensation with your own job. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'll be a great dad. I don't even want you near our child. Stay away. I moved away, shielding my belly from him, and Mia stepped in front of me protectively. Amelia, whose color had started to return to her face, slinked over to Mia. Mia, could you please tell everyone this was all a misunderstanding? I feel like I've been kind of lost lately. No way. Actually, stay away from me from now on too. I can never forgive you for what you did to my favorite person. Wait, are you seriously choosing your favorite person over a friend? I can't believe this. I need to meet a good guy in college, or I might never get married before I hit my 30s. You don't need to get married. Ever. And we're not friends anymore, either. Just as the two college girls started bickering seriously, John intervened, his face contorted with anger from his failed attempts to plead with me. Amelia, I'm calculating all the money I spent since our first date. You're paying your half. Why should I do that? That's the price for bragging about me on your social media. You got to show off your older boyfriend and had a good time, didn't you? I did not. It's been nothing but a loss for me. Stay away from me, you old man. Their ugly argument escalated to the point that not only the residents of Amelia's apartment building, but even the neighbors came out to see what was happening. Yet their back and forth over "give me money" and "no way" showed no signs of stopping. Enough of this. Get inside, both of you, or I'm calling the police. My words stopped both John and Amelia in their tracks. John still looked at me with pleading eyes. Charlotte, you're coming with me to Amelia's apartment, as if this is your dream come true, isn't it? Enjoy the university girl's apartment all by yourself. Goodbye forever. Leaving John behind, tearfully calling my name, I finally managed to walk away from the scene, escorted by Mia, whose face was just as relieved as mine. We headed back to pack up the rest of my belongings from the house. Later, after I filed for compensation in the divorce proceedings, Amelia's parents reached out to apologize. Apparently, Amelia had begged them to let her attend a university far from home. She insisted that her studies were too demanding to allow any part-time work, so her parents had been sending her a significant allowance. However, the truth was, she hardly ever studied or attended classes. Instead, she spent most of her time partying, flirting with guys, and going on dates. She had fallen so far behind that she couldn't even advance to the next academic year. When news of my compensation claim in the divorce trial reached her parents, everything was exposed. As a result, Amelia was forced to drop out of university and return home. She fought hard against this, crying and protesting, as she had always looked down on her rural hometown when she became a university student. But when her parents asked her if she could afford to pay for her living expenses and a compensation claim herself, she had no choice but to comply and returned home quietly. Shortly after, Amelia started working part-time, but in her hometown, rumors had already spread about how she had stolen the husband of a nationally famous news anchor, making her notorious. Wherever she worked, people either distrusted her or mocked her, making her life miserable. Despite that, she couldn't quit her job because of the compensation payments she had to make, and she couldn't afford to move out of her parents' house either. The marriage she had hoped to achieve before hitting her 30s is now utterly out of reach. John, too, faced severe consequences from his own family. His parents had been eagerly awaiting the birth of their grandchild, and now, as a result of their son's foolishness, they couldn't even hold the baby in their arms. Worse yet, they were left with an adult son, burdened with a divorce and financial difficulties, coming back home to mooch off them. As for me, being a former local news anchor, I had always been a source of pride for John's relatives. John, who had betrayed me, found himself completely isolated when he returned to his hometown. His parents and visiting relatives constantly berated him for what he had done, leaving him utterly deflated. Eventually, John couldn't stand the life he had fallen into, and he ran away from home. With no savings and only the mounting compensation from the divorce to pay, he couldn't afford a decent place to live. He ended up renting a shabby, old apartment in terrible condition. Worse still, word of his divorce and the reasons behind it spread quickly at work. John had boasted endlessly about me when we were first married, and now his colleagues knew him as the awful man who betrayed his pregnant wife. His once prized position was now in jeopardy, and he was no longer trusted with any important tasks. His pay wasn't increasing either. Though his income had always been modest, it quickly became unsustainable with the compensation payments from the divorce and a child support that began once our baby was born. John's financial situation collapsed rapidly. Now, he works part-time at night doing cleaning and traffic control just to scrape by. His declining hygiene and overall appearance are making him an even bigger outcast at his main job, and it's likely that he'll soon lose even that. As for me, I've no intention of waiving John's compensation payments. Though I hardly need the child support, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and the delivery went smoothly. My parents, along with Mia, who has become a close friend since the divorce drama, visit me frequently, so I haven't felt nearly as lonely as I expected. Once my health stabilized after giving birth, I began taking on work I could do from home. Gradually, I expanded my opportunities, and now I'm busier than ever on TV, radio, and in magazines, reaching even farther than I did as an announcer. Mia, who has been a fan of mine from the beginning, has continued supporting me even after graduating from university and entering the workforce. Surprisingly, she had been a law student and is now working at a law firm while studying hard for the bar exam to become a lawyer. Despite our new friendship where we often meet up for tea, she still finds it inspirational seeing me on television, saying it motivates her to keep studying. She checks out every media appearance I make, using it as fuel for her ambitions. Beyond Mia, many of my fans have welcomed my return to the public eye. Having overcome my husband's betrayal and now raising a child on my own, I've gained even more supporters than when I was an announcer. People seem to admire me as a single mom and announcer, and the unexpected warmth from the public has been both surprising and motivating, encouraging me to work even harder. My daughter is growing up healthy, even without a dad. I have my parents, and Mia is always around. My other friends have also been checking in regularly, so there's no shortage of loving adults helping to take care of us. While I may not have had a good eye for picking a husband, I've certainly been blessed with wonderful people around me, and it seems my luck in work is exceptional as well. Still, I don't want to let this good fortune go to my head. I need to keep putting in the effort and not let my guard down. Above all, I'm just grateful that my daughter and I can live each day full of energy and joy together.
Starting today, you're living alone in this house because your presence isn't beneficial for our child's upbringing. Right after giving birth, my husband dragged me into an old apartment near his parents' home. But how am I supposed to live alone in a place like this? Give me my child back. Don't cause a scene like that. It's disgraceful and it bothers the neighbors. Please, be quiet. Beside my husband, my mother-in-law stood, scowling and disregarding my pleas with harsh words. And to add insult to injury, she started to leave bags of organic waste in front of the rundown building every day. With no place to throw away the accumulating trash, I reluctantly opened one of the bags to find something unbelievable inside. I am Sarah, a 27-year-old housewife. It's been 2 years since I married Alex, and we were anxiously waiting for our first child's birth. However, my joy was overshadowed by worries about Alex's spendthrift ways, his temper, and the relationship with my mother-in-law. We were living with his mother at his parents' home since his father passed away early. My relationship with my mother-in-law was far from pleasant. She criticized me at every turn and Alex would frequently rebuke me, upset by our exchanges. What kind of folding is this? You'll crease the clothes. Can't you do even this properly? Start again from the beginning. But the other day, Mother, you told me to fold them this way. What? Are you blaming me? My mother-in-law threw the clothes I'd folded onto the floor, messing them up, and angrily pushed them into the nearby laundry basket. She constantly criticized my household chores and, more often than not, she would change her instructions, making it look like I was the one making mistakes. Sarah, why can't you remember simple things? Imagine how I feel, coming home from work and always having to hear about this. Whenever Alex heard such conversations, he'd instantly lose his temper, lash out at objects, and blame me loudly. Alex was cold to me, yet strangely possessive. The only numbers on my cell phone were Alex's and his family's. My internet history was visible to Alex, as if shared. And my location was monitored through GPS. I knew Alex was jealous before we married, but instead of getting better, the constraints worsened. I was tired and started considering divorce. I managed to contact a law firm I spotted on a billboard from a payphone at a store. I explained my situation and began preparations for divorce. Fortunately, I had some savings from before the marriage. The lawyer sympathized with my situation and assured me, "We will definitely get your divorce settled. As for the payment, you can pay it in installments after your life stabilizes." One day, I noticed I had been feeling unwell for a few days. I rushed to the hospital. And to my disbelief, I found out I was pregnant. I had been taking precautions to avoid pregnancy for the sake of the divorce, but Alex had hidden my medication, and I suspect that was when I got pregnant. Mixed feelings of joy for the child and anger towards Alex's actions made me determined to divorce soon. But I had no family home to return to, and with severe morning sickness, I couldn't act as quickly as I wanted and had to spend the days leading up to childbirth at Alex's family home. Alex, knowing about the child, softened his attitude, either convinced I wouldn't run away or genuinely happy about the child. "We'll need to renovate the house for the baby. If it's a boy, he'll play baseball or football, and if it's a girl, she'll learn to respect men." He shared his self-centered educational philosophy. All the while, I kept responding vaguely, knowing internally that I'll divorce once the baby is born. During my pregnancy, my mother-in-law said to me, "If something happens to you, the neighbors might misunderstand and think I did something. So, Sarah, just focus on the baby and don't do anything extra. I don't understand why Alex had a child with someone like you. I'll take care of you until the baby is born, but I really wish you would leave." Despite her constant complaints, she stopped piling chores on me, and I was able to rest. My morning sickness was severe, but even though she complained, "What on earth can you eat? You're so troublesome," she did prepare meals, which helped me get by. However, I almost suffered from malnutrition and had to spend the week before childbirth in the hospital. I safely gave birth to a healthy baby boy and was about to contact my lawyer to proceed with the divorce from Alex as planned when I noticed all my pre-marriage savings were gone. My diary, where I documented harassment from Alex and my mother-in-law, which I was planning to give to my lawyer, was also missing. Could it be Alex? I was shocked, and then I heard Alex's voice from behind me. "Looking for this?" I turned around, and there was Alex, smirking and holding the diary that I had locked and hidden deep in the closet. "You even locked it. What were you writing?" "Give it back." "Shut up! What were you hiding from me, your husband?" "I'm preparing for our divorce. I can't live any longer with someone as unpredictable as you, who quickly resorts to throwing things and shouting to make me obey. I want a divorce," I declared, straying from my plan but determined to see it through. "Fine, I'll give you a divorce. But the kids are staying with me." With that, Alex dragged me to a rundown apartment in the neighborhood near his parents' home. "You staying close is bad for the kids. From today, you're living here alone. While you're living here, I'll let you see the kids once a week. If you leave, you'll never see them again." What are you saying? Give me back my kids! Stop making a scene! You're disturbing the neighborhood. Please keep it down. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, who had joined us unnoticed, scolded me while holding my child. I need to get out of this situation somehow. I thought desperately, but no solution came to mind, and I was thrust into the dilapidated apartment. It seemed that Alex had noticed my intentions to divorce during my hospital stay and prepared this situation meticulously. My kids ended up with Alex, and I couldn't just abandon them in their current situation. The next day, I waited for Alex to leave before I tried to leave the apartment to check on the situation at my in-laws. But I noticed a strange smell. Investigating, I found to my shock that there were bags of organic waste dumped outside my room. I couldn't believe my eyes, but I immediately knew it was my mother-in-law's doing. Oh, Sarah, you're just waking up? Even if we're taking care of the kids, don't you think you're lacking a sense of responsibility as a mother? Well, never mind. There's no space at our place for this garbage, so could you keep it here until garbage day? While holding my child, my mother-in-law brazenly said this to me when I visited her house. I have to get my kids back and contact a lawyer. Thinking this, I waited for an opportunity, but 3 days passed. Every morning during this time, bags of organic waste were dumped in front of my house. I was filled with rage, wondering what I had done to deserve this. However, on the 3rd day, a turning point came. It was when I was moving the usual bag of garbage dumped in front of my house. Usually, the garbage bag was black, but that day, it was a white bag that was see-through. And upon closer inspection of the bag, I noticed an envelope inside addressed to Sarah. I immediately took out the envelope and checked inside, where I found several $100 bills and a letter from my mother-in-law. In it, she wrote about wanting to help with the kids and the divorce from Alex, but being under surveillance and unable to do anything, that she had been putting envelopes with some money in the garbage bags since a few days ago, and an apology for what happened. Surprised by this, I checked the other garbage bags, and sure enough, there were envelopes in the other bags as well, each with a small amount of cash inside. I am truly sorry for all I've done. I knew about Alex's abhorrent behavior, and I was harsh to you because I wanted you to escape from him. Due to Alex's surveillance, I had to resort to such measures. I sincerely apologize for all the troubles I have caused. As for the money, I'm sorry I could only give you this much while dodging Alex's watchful eyes. Yesterday, I received a call from a lawyer. He didn't give me many details, but he mentioned he'll visit tomorrow noon. Please, run away with your child. I will deal with Alex. I'm really sorry. The note from my mother-in-law was written in ink that had blurred in places, perhaps due to her tears. Reading it, I realized for the first time that she too was a victim of Alex's behavior. I also learned that while she took good care of me during my pregnancy, she also managed to keep my child safe from Alex's scrutiny. The shocking contents of the letter left me bewildered. Given Alex's personality, it was possible that he had been looking down on his mother just because she was a woman, even though she was his own mother. In the other bag was an envelope, filled not only with cash, but also more letters of apology, and countless pictures of my child. Feeling my mother-in-law's concern, I sorted my thoughts for the lawyer's meeting the following day and fell asleep. The next day, I was awakened by the sound of the intercom. When I opened the door, my worn-out mother-in-law was standing there, holding my child. Alex is on a business trip starting today and won't be back for 3 days. This might be our last chance. I am truly sorry.
What will you do now, mother-in-law? Won't Alex fly into a rage when he finds out the child is gone?
Probably, but that's my responsibility since I raised Alex. Besides, I can't work at my age, and since I'm not very smart, I can't survive without Alex's support. I invited my mother-in-law into the house to hear more of her story. As it turned out, she had been subjected to a form of brainwashing from Alex and her late husband, who constantly told her she was incompetent. Her life was devoid of freedom, dedicated entirely to them. She wasn't even allowed to watch TV when her husband was alive, and it was only after his death that she was able to watch a few programs. It was through them that she realized something was wrong with her situation. However, she was unable to free herself and became cold and distant towards me when I came into the family as Alex's wife, hoping to prevent me from suffering the same fate. I may never forget what you said to me, mother-in-law, and my wounds may not heal easily. But you've paved the way for me to escape from Alex. Let's run away together. We have to avoid letting Alex ruin the rest of our lives. My mother-in-law looked puzzled at my words. I can't do that. I'm good for nothing. I'll only be a burden if I run away with you, she insisted. In the midst of all this, the lawyer I had been consulting since before my pregnancy arrived. I told him everything that had happened, and his face grew grim as he listened. What do you want to do, ma'am? Please tell me your true feelings. I will support you with all my might. After some contemplation, the lawyer asked my mother-in-law with sincerity. She responded, I truly want to break free from Alex. I love him because he is my child, but living a life constantly being invalidated is unbearable. It's painful to think I won't see my grandchild anymore, but... With this story, she showed the lawyer her bruised arm. This bruise was so large it shocked me. When I asked my mother-in-law about it, she revealed that after I left, Alex had become abusive due to our child's crying at night. She said such incidents were frequent before our marriage but had not occurred since I became his wife. The lawyer's expression filled with anger, and he started persuading us to escape, promising to teach Alex a harsh lesson. Yet, his persuasion fell on deaf ears, and my mother-in-law went straight back to her marital home, waiting for Alex to return. We couldn't change her decision, so the lawyer and I began preparing to flee. I called my cousin, explained the situation, and asked if I could hide at her place for a while. She accepted, crying, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I quickly packed and headed to my cousin's house with my child. A few days later, I got a call from the lawyer, asking if I wanted to participate in a discussion about divorcing Alex. During the call, the lawyer told me that my mother-in-law had changed her mind and would join the discussion. I decided to participate, as it was going to be the last time. On the day of the meeting at the lawyer's office, Alex and my mother-in-law were already there. Seeing me, Alex said, "I was worried. I will kick Mom out, let's live together, just the three of us." Ignoring him, I took my seat, and the lawyer started explaining about the divorce, alimony, and child support. Alex kept pleading with me to return, but I replied, "Alex, the lawyer is speaking. Can't you listen when he is discussing something so important? Have you ever thought about how I feel, hearing you talk about our life together when I'm already tired of it?" Alex's face turned red, and he seemed ready to explode, but he held back, likely due to the lawyer's presence. After the lawyer finished explaining, and when the discussion had calmed down, Alex asked, "What are you so unhappy about? If it's about Mom, we can work it out, can't we? How can you not understand that I love you so much? Do you really think we can divorce over something like this? Love? Don't make me laugh. You've isolated me from the outside world, subjected me to your anger. How can you be so selfish?" I replied, laughing. Alex stood up but sat back down at the lawyer's instruction. He then turned his rage towards his mother.
Why are you silent when Sarah is leaving because of you? How could you give her money without consulting me, ruining our child's happiness?
He shouted.
To ensure Sarah's life wouldn't become miserable because of you.
My mother-in-law retorted, and produced an IC recorder that had captured the constant derogatory and controlling words Alex had thrown at me. She had been preparing for this day since before I got pregnant. With this amount of evidence, a divorce would undoubtedly be granted, even if it comes to a trial. Would you rather agree to divorce here and now, or let it escalate to a trial and have it become known to your company and those around you? The lawyer grouped all the evidence I had gathered, thrusting a divorce at Alex. Alex, seeming resigned, slumped and signed the divorce papers saying,
I'll divorce here. I'll transfer the money right away. Just give me another chance.
When? Right now? Do you have the full amount ready? As I responded to Alex's plea, he instantly brightened up, promising to arrange the money immediately and rushed off to the bank. Returning quickly, a smiling Alex showed me the transaction history and asked, How about now? Feeling like coming back a little? I laughed out loud at this, replying, You can't be serious. You think if I come back, this money comes back too? I'll never see you again. With that final statement from me, Alex was stunned, and to put the final nail in the coffin, my mother-in-law chimed in. With that final statement from me, Alex was stunned, and to put the final nail in the coffin, my mother-in-law chimed in. I've put up with a lot till now, but if it ends this quickly, it's for the best. Alex, I'm leaving you. I'll live on my own. She then handed out a piece of paper.
Don't involve me anymore. If you do, I'll take this to the police.
The paper was a medical report of injuries inflicted on my mother-in-law by Alex. Then the lawyer calmly stated, From your past behavior and evidence collected so far, your mother-in-law is well prepared to file a lawsuit. Alex broke down crying.
Why? Even Mom is betraying me?
In response to Alex's anguished voice, my mother-in-law grimaced and I addressed him. Betrayal? You're the one raising a hand to your family. Yet when you get hurt by that same family, you cry? We've been enduring all this time. Ignoring Alex, who was glaring at us in silence, I took my mother-in-law's hand and left the office. After that, the meeting at the lawyer's office with Alex concluded smoothly, and my mother-in-law sold the family home and moved to Atlanta, relying on her relatives. Apparently, she was living comfortably off her late husband's considerable legacy. As for me, I got a job in a faraway place after the divorce was finalized. Now, with the help of others around me, I am living a new life with my child. My marriage was filled with endurance and my own preconceptions, putting up with unnecessary suffering and almost ruining my life. I want my child to avoid such pointless endurance, and hope they become a gentle person with their own will, consideration, and kindness towards others. While praying for this, I want to take care of my own heart and move forward in my new life.
The body was badly damaged, so for sanitary reasons, we've already held the burial. The moment the word sanitary reached my ears, a wave of terror and despair welled up from the depths of my soul. It was Louis, Katie's husband, who informed me that my daughter, Katie, had passed away. Just yesterday, she had smiled at me. "I'll see you soon," she said. But now, Louis coldly said, "I'm quite busy, so I'll have to go." Before hanging up the phone, I was left in a daze. I tried calling him back several times to ask about the funeral, but eventually, I was blocked. A chilling fear and overwhelming despair swirled within me. The sense of loss, the feeling of being utterly alone in the world, slowly ate away at my heart. And so, 3 years passed. No matter how much time went by, fragments of Katie remained lodged in my heart. Her presence never left my mind, no matter how much time passed. That day, as I was on my way home from work, as usual, I found myself thinking of Katie without even realizing it. If she were alive, what kind of life would she be living right now? As I was lost in these thoughts, I suddenly noticed someone standing in front of the entrance to my home. A woman, whom I didn't recognize, was just standing there. Her back was slender, and her long hair swayed in the wind. My heart jumped, and I was stunned. At that moment, the woman turned around, and it seemed she had noticed me. "What? No way," I muttered without thinking. "I'm home," she said. The person standing there was Katie, who I had been told died 3 years ago. She looked exactly the same as she had on that day, as if time had stopped, as beautiful as ever. I was overwhelmed with confusion and shock, unable to say a word. "Mom, I'm sorry I'm late," Katie said, tears welling up in her eyes, her voice trembling. "My name is Haley." As I gazed at the sunset outside my window, I found myself immersed in memories. Memories of when I had just given birth to my daughter, Katie. Since the day I lost my husband, Jameson, Katie's father, in an accident, my life had never been the same. A deep scar had been carved into my heart, and I realized just how much his presence had meant to me. His smile, his kindness, how much they had supported me. Every day, I felt the weight of losing him. Time may heal wounds, but this loneliness, this emptiness, remains lodged in my chest like a heavy stone. Years have passed since then, but his smile, his voice, they're still as vivid in my mind as if it all happened yesterday. Remembering them should bring me joy, but instead, it fills me with sorrow. The joy I felt when Katie was born, and the loneliness that followed, still battle within my heart. Even now, after my husband's death, I made up my mind to raise Katie on my own. I worked tirelessly for Katie's sake and to carry on his memory. All my efforts were focused on living the irreplaceable moments of the present with my beloved Katie. I have to keep going. Keep going. At some point, this word became my catchphrase. Not that I said it to anyone in particular, but to motivate myself, I'd whisper, "Must keep going. I can do it, thanks to my hard work." Katie studied diligently and got into a good university. She made it through both her studies and social life without any major issues, graduating successfully. After graduation, she started living with her boyfriend Louis, and I began living alone in my apartment. At first, I felt a bit lonely, but Katie would come check in on me from time to time, and we talked frequently on the phone, so I wasn't really lonely at all. However, each time I realized Katie no longer needed me to take care of her, I felt the tension in my shoulders release, and a small sense of emptiness crept in. No more need to keep pushing myself. Yet, for some reason, that thought made me feel lonely. "Mom, I'm bringing Louis over this weekend." One day, she told me that out of the blue over the phone. It was the moment I'd been waiting for. Katie introducing her boyfriend to me meant that she was ready to take the next step in her life. This was it truly. I didn't have to keep pushing myself anymore. With mixed feelings of excitement and a hint of sadness, I awaited the weekend. As I prepared for Katie and Louis' visit, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation swirled within me. When the doorbell rang, my heart raced. I hurried to open the door. Standing there was Katie's familiar smile, along with Louis, whom I was meeting for the first time. He was tall and looked like a kind young man, with a gentle smile. As I felt a bit of relief at his appearance, I also tried to sense what might be hiding behind his eyes. "Hello, I'm Louis. Thank you for always taking care of Katie." Louis' calm voice put me at ease. He smiled, showing his neatly aligned, clean teeth, and squinted slightly as he looked at me. "I'm Haley. Thank you for coming today." I couldn't help but return his smile. After finishing the meal preparations, the three of us sat around the table. Katie listened to Louis' stories with a delighted expression, and my heart warmed as I watched them. Seeing Katie so happy made me happier than anything else. Louis, too, watched over Katie with kindness, matching his mood to her smile. Having started living with my husband after getting married, I had no experience with cohabitation before marriage, so I couldn't imagine what challenges and struggles the two of them might face, but as long as they were living happily together, I thought that was a wonderful thing. After the meal, I told Katie, "Take your time and relax," and started washing the dishes. The two of them spoke in voices too soft for me to hear. Seeing Louis gaze at Katie with such tenderness gave me a sense of relief. However, I couldn't stop noticing the faint dark circles under her eyes, and the thought stayed in my mind. Katie, is she overworked? That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but think about Katie. I was happy that she was preparing to take the next steps in her life, but I couldn't shake the underlying anxiety in my heart. Katie, I hope you'll be happy. I'm probably being overprotective, but overprotective or not, she is the most important person in the world to me. I closed my eyes, silently praying, and slowly drifted off to sleep. In my dreams, joyful memories flashed before me one after another, eventually fading away. When I woke, the stillness around me felt oddly lonely. A few months later, I received an unexpected call from Katie. Hearing her voice made me feel like I was continuing a dream. "I want to introduce Louis to you. Not as my boyfriend this time, but as my fiancé." Though she spoke over the phone, I could hear the happiness in her voice. I felt a mix of surprise and excitement, eagerly looking forward to their visit. On the day of their second visit, Louis showed up wearing a suit. From the very first time we met, I had a good impression of him. He stood tall, radiating both politeness and kindness. From what she had told me, Louis came from a prominent family in the local community. Raised in a wealthy household, his demeanor was gentle, and he treated Katie with great respect and care. "I'd like to welcome Katie into my family," Louis said. For a moment, tension flickered in my heart. There was something heavy about the way he phrased it. I couldn't help but probe further, trying to understand the meaning behind his words. "What do you mean by your family?" I asked. Louis's expression grew serious as he looked directly at me. "My family has been known as community leaders for generations. As the eldest son, there's an expectation that I must take a wife, and this belief is deeply ingrained in our family. To meet their expectations, I want to ask Katie to take on that role." His words sounded almost like a formal speech. The first thing that crossed my mind was, do people refer to themselves as community leaders? And what does it even mean to be a leader of the community? Though many questions arose, I decided to accept that families of certain stature had their own ways of thinking. Katie would take his family name, and from the way the conversation was going, it sounded like they would be living together with his family. After a brief moment of consideration, I agreed. It was only natural to put Katie's happiness first and respect her choices. But when I saw the clouded look on Katie's face, I grew concerned. "Katie, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay," she replied, though her answer wasn't very convincing. That night, Katie asked if she could stay over at my apartment, something she hadn't done in a long time. It was 10 p.m. Normally, I'd be in bed by then, but Katie pulled out a small bottle of whiskey from her bag. "Will you have a drink with me?" She smiled. We sat together in the corner of the kitchen, relying on the soft, dim lighting. We filled large glasses, not quite suited for whiskey, with plenty of ice, and drank it slowly, undiluted. Neither of us really liked alcohol that much. She seemed like she was forcing herself to drink the whiskey. I couldn't help but notice that the dark circles under her eyes had deepened since the last time I saw her. "If there's something you're worried about, don't hesitate to tell me," I said. "I'm fine. I'm just probably a little nervous about the upcoming wedding," she replied, with a slightly sad expression. I chose not to press further. It's her first wedding after all, so it's natural she would feel anxious. Things won't be the same as just continuing their cohabitation. Katie will be living at his family's house. I couldn't quite picture it, but I imagined something like those strict mother-in-law scenarios you see in movies or dramas, where she wakes up early to make breakfast. Then I shook my head. That's outdated thinking. There's no way families like that still exist today. I'm hungry, she murmured, so I made her a cup of instant noodles, her favorite one. When she was little, we used to split the noodles and toppings in half to share them. Seeing her now, able to finish an entire cup on her own, made me feel just a little lonely. We ate cup noodles and drank the strong whiskey, chatting late into the night. I wondered if one day we would look back on nights like this and feel nostalgic. Katie left the next morning, but she called me a few times after that. She talked about how busy she was with wedding preparations, how hard she was working on cooking and laundry, all small, mundane things, but hearing her voice always put me at ease. A few weeks after Louis was introduced as her fiancé, we won't be having a family meeting, she told me. I had been nervous, thinking that such a prestigious family would naturally hold a formal meeting, so I felt a little deflated. There was a time when I wondered if we weren't having one because I was a single mother. Maybe I was being a bit self-conscious. In the end, even as the wedding day approached, I never got the chance to meet Louis's parents. It seemed the first time we would exchange greetings would be at the wedding itself, and I was anxious. The day before the wedding, Katie came to my house. Smiling, she said, "I want to spend my last night as a single woman with you." I was surprised, but seeing her face brought me relief. Spending a quiet night together in my small apartment didn't sound so bad. "Mom, what's married life like?" she asked. "Well, it's different for every couple, so it's hard to say," I answered. For me, having lost my husband so early on, the memories of what married life was like were now distant. The busy days of raising her blurred the time I spent with my husband, leaving those memories somewhat idealized. From tomorrow, a new chapter in Katie's life will begin. I'm sure Dad is watching from heaven, wishing for her happiness. Yay, I hope so. Katie lost her dad when she was very young, so she probably doesn't remember much about him. Even so, there's something I want to tell her. Your dad always had such a happy look on his face whenever he saw you as a little girl. We lost track of time as we talked about all sorts of things. I shared the joys and challenges of married life, memories of my husband, hoping to encourage Katie as she imagined her own happy future. When the melody from the clock on the wall started to play, we both fell silent, our eyes drifting away. Katie then said, "I think I should get going." So I decided to walk her to the door. It feels like time just flew by. It's kind of lonely, isn't it? Don't worry, Mom. Even after I'm married, I'll come visit you all the time. Her words, and that slightly tired smile of hers, tugged at my heart. After seeing Katie off, I kept replaying her words. "I'll come visit you all the time," over and over in my mind, praying for her happiness. Yet, deep down, I felt something unsettling. Maybe it's just a mother's intuition, but Katie's occasional, fleeting sad expressions didn't seem to be just pre-wedding jitters. Is she really okay? That night, I thought about Katie for a long time. What must be going on in her heart as her wedding day approached us? These thoughts stayed with me as I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up early and took a shower. I did my hair and put on my makeup. I had already booked a taxi a few days ago, and it would come to pick me up right on time. Taking a taxi felt like a bit of a luxury, but Katie and Louis had arranged everything for me. They even prepared my dress at the venue, so I wasn't planning to bring anything with me. As I was getting ready, my smartphone rang. It was a call from Louis. The bride and groom should already be at the venue getting ready. So what could this be about? Worried, I answered the call. "Good morning, Louis. Is everything all right?" I tried to respond cheerfully, thinking he might just be feeling nervous before the big day. But Louis's voice was unusually heavy. "Hey Lee, I'm sorry. Something terrible has happened." My heart started to race. At that moment, I was filled with dread, terrified of what he might say next. "Katie was in an accident last night. She passed away. I couldn't immediately grasp what Louis was saying. It felt as if time had frozen, and I was left speechless. Louis continued speaking. It was at a crosswalk on her way home. She was hit by a car. The damage to her body was severe, and due to sanitary concerns, we've already laid her to rest. As soon as the word sanitary hit my ears, a deep terror and despair welled up inside me. Katie was gone. I couldn't believe it. Katie had been fine just yesterday. How could something like this happen? My mind was a whirlpool of confusion. Why? Why did you go ahead and bury her without telling me? I asked, my voice trembling. The grief of losing Katie began to turn into anger. No, this had to be a cruel joke by Louis, or perhaps a nightmare I hadn't woken from. Katie passed away last night, and she's already been buried. How is that even possible? Louis' tone suddenly grew cold, and I could faintly hear him sigh on the other end. We had already filed the marriage certificate before the ceremony. Katie is part of our family now. I had no obligation to tell you in advance. Wait, that's right. I remember. There should be investigations and procedures after a death. There's no way she could have been buried so quickly. Hey, Louis, what are you hiding? Huh? If you had seen the state of that accident, you wouldn't be thinking about things so leisurely. My family has a relative who manages burials, and we handled it discreetly. That can't be. And besides, Katie's smartphone was destroyed in the accident. Even if you tried to call, it wouldn't go through. Those words pierced my heart. Destroyed. Was she really hurt that badly? Please at least allow me to attend her funeral. I desperately pleaded, but Louis coldly responded, I'm going to be busy from here on, so I'll have to excuse myself. And with that, he hung up. I was left in shock. Cold fear and despair swirled inside me. Unable to sit still, I decided to take a taxi to the apartment where Katie and Louis had been living. I knew the address, though it was my first time visiting. When I arrived at the apartment, there was an eerie stillness around the door. I knocked. The sound echoed back at me, unanswered. No one was there. I hesitantly reached for the door, but it seemed to be locked. Just then, a neighbor, a young man who looked like a university student, poked his head out. He looked at me suspiciously. The people who lived there, they moved out just last week, he said. Katie. Tears streamed down my face as I murmured my daughter's name. As I stood in front of the apartment, lost in a daze, it began to rain. The sky was clear and blue, yet rain was falling. I used the rain as an excuse to stay there, unable to move. Inside, I couldn't accept that Katie was really gone. Sinking deeper into sadness, losing Katie made me feel truly, utterly alone. After that, I kept calling Louis over and over, trying to find out more about Katie's funeral. But Louis's voice grew more irritated with each call. Stop calling me. Katie is gone. Whatever you say now, it's too late. Please, let me attend her funeral. I need a chance to say goodbye to her. I've told you before, this is none of your concern. She may have passed away, but she was part of our family. You need to respect our decisions. Despite my continuous calls, Louis eventually stopped answering and blocked my number. Feeling powerless and consumed by despair, I had no choice but to accept the reality that Katie was gone, though I clung to the memories of her. The grief of losing Katie and the overwhelming loneliness that came with it slowly ate away at me. I lost my appetite, and my weight dropped drastically. But I didn't even have the energy to care about such things. And time passed, until 3 years went by. No matter how much time passed, a part of Katie still lingered in my heart. Life went on, but Katie's absence constantly cast a shadow over me. When I woke up in the morning, I thought of Katie's smile. Before going to sleep at night, I could still hear her voice in my ears. No matter how much time went by, Katie was never far from my thoughts. That day, on my way home from work, I was absent-mindedly thinking about Katie, as I often did. I wondered what her life would have been like if she were still alive. As I was lost in these thoughts, I suddenly noticed someone standing in front of my door. My heart skipped a beat. It was a woman, just standing there. Her frame was slight, and her long hair swayed gently in the breeze. I froze for a moment, unable to move, staring in disbelief. The woman noticed me and slowly turned around. What? No way. Standing before me was Katie, who I had been told died 3 years ago. She was as beautiful as she had been, as if time had stood still. I was overwhelmed with confusion and shock, rendered speechless. "Mom, I'm home. I'm sorry for being so late," Katie said, her voice trembling and tears in her eyes. Katie was alive, standing right in front of me. Was this a dream or a hallucination? Unable to believe what I was seeing, I stared at Katie's face. I stumbled backward, and in a shaky voice, I asked, "Katie." Tears streamed down my face, and through the whirlwind of emotions in my mind, I repeated her name over and over. Katie smiled softly and approached me. "Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. Is it really you, Katie? How are you still alive?" Though the words were coming out of my own mouth, I was completely lost, unsure of what was real anymore, but I continued to question Katie. "I'm sorry, Mom. So much has happened, and it took me too long to come back." As if suddenly remembering, I grabbed Katie's hand and hurriedly pulled her inside the house. My daughter, who I had been told died 3 years ago, had returned. The situation was clearly abnormal. I needed to hear the full story right away, so I sat Katie down at the table and faced her. Holding her hand tightly, I noticed how rough it was, like someone who had done a lot of hard work. I gently stroked her hand, which was dry and cracked. "Katie, what on earth happened? How did it come to this?" Katie looked at me with confusion in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment, then locked her gaze on mine. Taking a deep breath, she finally began to speak. "Mom, ever since I started living with Louis, right from the start, both him and his parents have." Katie's voice faltered, and she placed her hand on her chest, struggling to continue. I decided to wait, letting her speak at her own pace. After a few more deep breaths, Katie began speaking again, this time in a quieter but steady voice. "My position as their daughter-in-law was terrible. It was like I was less than human. They treated me like a slave." I was shocked, but at the same time, a part of me doubted her words. "Since the time you started living together, that was quite a while ago, wasn't it? I had met Louis when they were living together, and he didn't seem like someone who would treat her so cruelly. Louis, he's very kind. He's calm, intelligent. There were even times when I felt I didn't deserve him." To Katie, Louis initially seemed charming and reliable. With his handsome features and gentle smile, she had fallen for him. But as she grew closer to him, his true nature slowly began to reveal itself. But with me, he was always so controlling. He wanted to know everything I did. At first, I mistook it for care, and I was even flattered in some ways. But then it started to become painful, didn't it? Yes. He and his family would constantly say things like, "Ours is a prestigious family. You should be grateful to live with us and work for our sake." What is that supposed to mean? Katie's voice was shaking. Learning about the suffering she endured behind what had seemed like a happy life together crushed my heart. Katie continued, "They made me promise not to contact you after we got married. They told me I would never see you again." I was stunned, anger slowly building inside me. "That's unacceptable. How could they do such a thing?" Katie lowered her eyes. "The day before the wedding, I came to visit you because I thought it would be my last chance. I snuck out without Louis knowing, but..." Katie's voice filled with regret. "But Louis found out. I don't know how he knew I went to see you, but..." I looked at Katie with a questioning gaze, silently asking, "Why?" Katie gave a troubled, self-deprecating smile and slumped her shoulders. Louis laughed and said, "I put a GPS app on your smartphone. You didn't even notice, did you? And then, what happened? He took my smartphone away. They told you I had died in a car accident, and that the phone was destroyed, cutting off all communication with you." Tears welled up in Katie's eyes. Hearing this story, It felt like my heart was being torn apart. In retrospect, why hadn't I tried harder to visit Louis's family during those 3 years? Even though I didn't know their address, surely I could have found a way if I had tried. But instead, I had been paralyzed by shock, living in a haze of despair, doing nothing but wasting away. That's unforgivable. Were you fighting all alone in that horrible situation? I didn't have a choice. There was no one to help me. I was treated like nothing more than a servant for Louis's family. Katie's tone was distant, as if she were recounting someone else's story. I hugged her tightly, though she still looked as beautiful as she had 3 years ago. Beneath her clothes, her body was frail and thin. I had to protect Katie. The desire to shield her welled up inside me, overflowing from the depths of my heart. "I'm sorry, Mom," Katie whispered. "Why are you apologizing? Louis's the one who's at fault for everything." Katie began to speak softly, almost as if she were murmuring to herself. Louis hadn't been cruel from the beginning. He had been so kind. She wondered aloud where things had gone so wrong, and I gently stroked her head. "You know, I realized that Louis had installed the GPS app on my phone," she confessed. "What? But I thought it was just to make sure I wasn't cheating or something. I never imagined he'd get so angry just because I went to see you." Katie looked at me with innocent eyes, as if seeking validation, silently asking me whether her choices had been right or wrong, whether she deserved to be forgiven. "It's okay, Katie. I'm here now. I'll protect you. No one will hurt you anymore." Katie buried her face in my chest and cried. In that moment, I resolved to protect Katie at all costs. The fear of losing her again, mixed with a burning determination to save my beloved daughter, flared up inside me. I would never forgive them. As I held her hand tightly, a question suddenly bubbled up from the depths of my mind. "But why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me how much you were suffering? Why didn't you ask for help?" Katie lowered her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "I didn't want to worry you, Mom. After being berated by Louis's family for so long, I started to believe I had no worth." She cast her gaze downward, realizing how much she had suffered, how she had carried this burden alone for so long. I wondered, had I been so unreliable as a parent? If only she had said *help*. Just that one word. But then, a year ago, when Louis's mom ordered me to clean the whole house, I found my confiscated smartphone in the storage room. Katie explained that she had charged the phone, praying as she waited for it to turn on. The phone wasn't broken, but the service had been canceled, leaving only a few functions still usable. The first thing I did was install the GPS app. I kept the phone recording all the time and carried it with me wherever I went, making sure no one would find it. As Katie finished recounting her story, her previously dark and somber expression brightened slightly, filled with hope. It seemed that finding her smartphone had been the turning point, a beacon of light that led her toward escaping her oppressive life. They were so sure that I was always at home. Louis and his family never even thought to check the GPS app anymore. Thanks to that, I was able to move freely without raising suspicion. "That's amazing, Katie. So what did you do next?" I gathered enough evidence of the verbal abuse so that I could file for divorce with Louis. At fault. I've been enduring it all this time, and today, when they were out of the house, I packed what I needed and ran here. Katie's face showed a sense of relief. I hugged her tightly, overflowing with gratitude from the bottom of my heart. "You've been through so much. I should have confronted Louis and his family sooner. Then you wouldn't have had to suffer like this." As she buried her face in my chest, "Can I live with you again, Mom?" Katie murmured softly. The moment those words reached my ears, a warmth spread through my heart. "Of course, Katie. Let's live together again. From now on, we'll face everything together and enjoy life as we support each other." Katie looked up at me, a faint smile on her lips. That smile, like a glimmer of hope lost in her suffering, was radiant. Together, we would rebuild our lives. Though the path ahead would surely be difficult, I knew that, as long as we were together, We could overcome anything. Holding Katie tightly, I felt the flicker of hope for a brighter future. In the days that followed, however, I started to notice something about Katie's behavior that troubled me. Even in the middle of the night, she wouldn't stop fiddling with her smartphone, staying up until morning without sleeping. No matter how many times I told her, "You need to get some sleep," she would only give a half-hearted response and continue to gaze out the window instead of resting. This felt off. Feeling concerned, I suggested that we visit a nearby psychiatrist, but she vehemently refused. Reluctantly, I drove her to a mental health clinic farther away, one that had a beautiful exterior, hoping she would feel more comfortable there. The clinic was on the 3rd floor of a building, and the elevator was small and stifling. The doctor, a slightly overweight man with a kind expression, listened patiently to Katie's story. Later, I was called into a separate room, where the doctor told me, "She's depressed," in the same casual tone someone might use to say, "It's just a cold." They prescribed 2 types of medication, one to calm her emotions, and another to help her sleep. Gently pulling Katie close, I realized just how deep her emotional wounds were. After that, we visited a law office together to discuss her divorce. With Katie's medical diagnosis and the audio recordings she had collected, the evidence was deemed sufficient, and we planned to file for compensation from Louis in divorce court. Additionally, given the severity of the verbal abuse she had endured from her in-laws, we would also seek damages from them. Now it was only a matter of taking it to court. Katie had made up her mind about something. It wasn't enough to simply talk to Louis about the divorce. She needed him to understand the pain he had put her through. Today was the day. I sat next to Katie in a quiet cafe, ready to support her. Louis arrived a little late, and Katie glanced at me nervously. I smiled and reassured her, "It's okay. You've got this." Louis looked different from the last time I'd seen him, tired and worn. He took a seat, ordered an iced coffee, and without even acknowledging me, stared directly at Katie in silence. "Louis, we need to talk. You left the house without a word. Do you know how worried I've been? Even Mom's been frantic." His gaze was a mix of confusion and irritation. When the iced coffee arrived, he stabbed the straw into it and took a single sip. "Your verbal abuse and cruelty. I can't take it anymore, Louis." "What nonsense are you talking about? Hurry up and come home to do the housework." "That's why I bothered to show up. I was diagnosed with depression, Louis. Because of the way you treated me, I've been suffering." For a brief moment, Louis was silent, but then a cold smile crept across his face. For the first time, he acknowledged my presence with a glance, smirking as he said, "Hey, who put you up to this?" Then his tone shifted back to indifference. "Doesn't matter. You're my wife, and you'll do as I say. I don't have to listen to you anymore." Katie's voice trembled with tears, but her words were firm and resolute. "I want a divorce. I want my freedom back." With that, Katie reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone, playing the audio recordings she had gathered. Louis' past verbal assaults, along with the vicious remarks from his parents, filled the cafe. Katie didn't care about the volume. She didn't care if people stared. Let everyone hear it. Let them all know the kind of man Louis really was. "You're useless, can't do anything right. You should be grateful you even have a place in this house." Louis' own voice echoed back to him, growing louder as it reached his ears. He looked visibly shaken, his face turning pale. "Turn the volume down. You're disturbing everyone. This is the reality I've been living with, Louis," Katie said calmly. "Now you understand how much you've tormented me, don't you?" Louis was speechless, a look of fear creeping across his face. To have his own cruel words played back to him like this, how must it feel? He took several more sips of his iced coffee, wiping the sweat from his brow, clearly rattled. "Aren't you embarrassed, dragging our family's name through the mud like this? I'm not afraid of your words anymore. I'm choosing to leave you and reclaim my life." Her voice was strong and unwavering. Louis, clearly shocked by Katie's sudden assertiveness, stared in disbelief. It was likely that Katie had never once stood up to him like this before. As I watched her muster every ounce of courage to speak her truth, I applauded her in my heart. What you did to her is unforgivable. For her to live a happy life from now on, she needs to be free from you. I turned to Louis and spoke firmly. He was visibly shaken by my words, covering his face with his hands. Wait. Just wait. Divorce, that's impossible. As the eldest son, what will my family say? I can't be the one to break tradition. No, Louis. What's impossible is for you to continue. Louis was at a loss for words, clearly shaken. His face went pale, his eyes flickering with fear. Katie has proof, evidence of how much you've hurt her. We'll reveal everything in court. The mention of court made Louis's face flush red with anger. He stood up suddenly, slamming the table as he loomed over Katie and me. Gone was the composed, handsome man he liked to portray. Instead, his face was twisted in rage, revealing the real him beneath the surface. Are you both out of your minds? I told you from the start we come from a prestigious family. Do you even understand what it means to live in my house? You, Katie, a penniless girl who rushed into marriage just for my wealth. His voice was tinged with uncertainty, even as he spat those words. I found myself watching him from a distance, almost detached, wondering, why was he so angry? Why couldn't he value Katie? Why, if he feared this outcome so much, had he continued to torment her for so long? The consequences of your actions will come back to you, I said, maintaining my resolute stance. Katie rose from her chair, taking a step forward to confront Louis's trembling anger. The suffering you caused me, now it's your turn to face it. Louis, shaken by her words, took a step back. We explained that Katie had consulted with a lawyer. With the evidence of the verbal abuse recorded, Louis would be taken to court, and financial compensation would be demanded. Are you really going to go through with this? Do you have any idea who my family is? We have prominent figures, celebrities even, in our lineage. If this scandal gets out, that has nothing to do with me, Katie retorted sharply, her voice filled with newfound strength. She had made her decision. No more running away. She was going to take back her life. Weeks passed, though Louis initially resisted. When the lawyer pushed forward with the court case, he quickly agreed to the divorce and to paying compensation. When Katie heard the news, a sense of relief began to wash over her, as if the years of torment were finally starting to fade. But healing was not so simple. Her emotional scars were deep. Though she took her medication regularly, there were still many nights she couldn't sleep. Sometimes, without saying a word, she would break down in tears. I believed those tears were cleansing the 3 painful years she had endured. So I sat quietly by her side, offering no words, only presence. Katie wasn't yet ready to return to work, but slowly, she began to reconnect with old friends, her spirit starting to brighten once more. Her smile, which had been lost for so long, began to shine again. Seeing that transformation filled me with joy. Now, Katie was living with me, helping with household chores. On weekends, we would go out together, sometimes visiting the zoo. I hadn't been able to spend time with her when she was young because work kept me so busy. I never imagined that we'd find ourselves at the zoo together like this now, with her all grown up. When we arrived at the zoo, Katie's eyes lit up with childlike excitement. Look, Mom, that panda is so cute. Seeing her innocence and joy brought a smile to my face. It made me think, how long had it been since I last visited a zoo? We spent the day together, moving from one animal exhibit to the next, enjoying the simple pleasures of being in each other's company. Hey, Mom, did you hear? Louis and his family are constantly fighting. They've used up all their savings, Katie said as we casually strolled past the quiet animals in their enclosures. Katie paused suddenly as we neared the far end of the zoo. There, in a small isolated cage, sat a little fox. That's what they deserve. They'll never understand the pain you went through, I responded, laughing softly, as if a weight had been lifted from my heart. Katie's eyes remained fixed on the fox, motionless and forlorn. I can't believe I wasted all that time suffering for people like them. It's time I let it go. That's the right choice. Doesn't this fox look kind of lonely? Katie's voice was soft, filled with empathy. The little creature lay quietly, its head lowered to the ground as if it were too tired to move. As I watched the fox, I found myself reflecting on the past, those feelings of isolation, the fear of being misunderstood. I thought about the days when her freedom had been stolen from her. Somehow I couldn't help but see her former self in the caged fox. Just then, rain began to fall unexpectedly. The sky was still clear, a passing sun shower, perhaps. It seemed like the kind of rain that would stop in just a few minutes. We took shelter under a nearby roof, watching the sky as we waited. The scene felt eerily familiar, just like that day, the day I learned Katie had passed away. That feeling of despair, that unbearable grief beneath the sky just like this. But this time, there was something different. A rainbow stretched across the blue sky, bright and hopeful. We stood together in silence, watching the rain quietly pass. Families and couples around us did the same, waiting under the shelters until the rain subsided. Life is so hard, isn't it? Katie murmured, her gaze fixed on the rainbow. Yes, it is, I whispered in reply. But the pain is over now. Let's be happy from here on out. Okay. Katie looked at me with a soft, knowing expression before turning her attention back to the fox in the cage. The fox, which had seemed on the verge of sleep just moments ago, now looked directly at Katie, as if sensing something. It lowered its head to the ground again, but this time with a sort of quiet peace. From that moment, Katie and I continued to live our days together, supporting each other, laughing, and sharing our worries. We were building a new bond, stronger than ever. As we moved forward in life, hand in hand, I knew there would be challenges and hardships, but together, we could face anything. Together, we could overcome. No, not just could, we would. Absolutely.
I can't believe I'm the only one without food. That's just cruel, mother-in-law.
As the eldest son's wife yells, she covers her face with both hands, her eyes brimming with tears. Just as her words imply, all that's in front of her is an empty glass and a solitary fork. The relatives seem to finally catch on to the situation and begin to jeer one after another. Whoa! Could this be Emily's debut of tormenting her daughter-in-law?
I'm on Team Naomi. Ghost mother-in-law, stop the torment. Begone, evil spirit.
Dear daughter-in-law, don't cry. It's a mix of 10% concern and 90% just messing around. I shrug my shoulders at the relatives who are starting to get tipsy from the drinks. For them, the discord between me and the eldest son's wife might just be another piece of entertainment at the New Year's celebration. In that case, as the host, I need to entertain our guests even more. Of course, this includes the very person who caused this situation, the eldest son's wife.
All right. I'll go get Naomi's portion too, so just wait a moment.
With resolution, I clutch a tray to my chest and head back to the kitchen. My name is Emily Johnson, 62 years old. After losing my beloved husband 2 years ago and my eldest son moving out after getting married a year ago, I've been living alone in this house. I can't say I don't feel lonely, but as someone who enjoys her own company, living alone isn't particularly hard for me. That's why I've been politely declining every time my eldest son invites me to live with him. I didn't want to intrude on his newlywed life and, fortunately, I have a lot of relatives living nearby, so I haven't been lonely. However, I would later come to understand the real meaning behind my son's persistent invitations to live together. It was an SOS from my eldest son.
Mom, please come help me right away.
It was one night, a few months after my eldest son got married. My eldest son suddenly called me. It was dinner time, and I was just about to eat my meal. "What's the matter? Why are you calling at this time?"
I'll explain later. For now, it's an emergency. I hate to impose, but can you come to my house right away?
Getting a sudden call without any explanation left me briefly perplexed. My eldest son's house was located in the neighboring county. It wasn't an impossible distance to cover right now, but it wasn't exactly around the corner either. Still, something in my eldest son's demeanor told me this was no ordinary matter, so I decided to put my dinner on hold and head to his house. What I found there was something I'll probably never forget. Part of the kitchen in their newly built house had been blackened by soot. The smell of burning and heat filled the air, and remnants of foam from a fire extinguisher were still scattered here and there. And right next to that kitchen, my daughter-in-law was crying inconsolably.
What on earth happened here?
"Well, we had a bit of a fire. Naomi was so upset, I had to call you. I hate to ask, but could you help us clean up?" According to my son, my daughter-in-law was cooking dinner when suddenly a pillar of fire shot up from the pan. I managed to put out the fire in the pan with a wet rag, but sparks flew and ignited the surroundings. I used the fire extinguisher to take care of the rest, but it made a mess of the kitchen. While he was telling me this, I noticed that he was holding an ice pack to his arm. It seems he had burned himself while putting out the fire. I decided to postpone cleaning the kitchen and started tending to my son's burn. Luckily, the burn wasn't severe, but this could have been a major disaster. Perhaps it's a blessing that this was the extent of the damage.
Is Naomi all right? Did she get burned or anything?
I'm fine. She didn't seem to have any burns as far as I could see. But Naomi was the one cooking, and it seemed strange that she was unharmed given the fierceness of the fire. When I asked about this, I found out the cause of the fire. Naomi, it seems, was scared of oil splattering when she was frying frozen croquettes. After some hesitation, she tossed a few croquettes from the edge of the kitchen into the pan. This caused the oil to splatter, and when the heated oil reached its limit, it ignited the gas stove, causing a pillar of fire. I was so scared. I'm afraid of frying stuff. My daughter-in-law continued sobbing. Even though she was shaken, it would have been nice if she could at least help with her husband's first aid. As I cleaned the kitchen, I let out a small sigh. In the end, cleaning the kitchen took about 3 hours. I ended up catching the last train home, and throughout that time, my daughter-in-law did nothing to help with the cleaning. She just kept complaining about how my favorite pot and I had a hard time choosing the kitchen wallpaper. Could it be that my daughter-in-law is bad at cooking? That suspicion turned into certainty a few months later, on my birthday. At my age, my own birthday isn't exactly a special day. It's more of a moment to reflect on getting another year older. Without my husband, I didn't feel any desire to be celebrated, so I planned to spend the day leisurely enjoying my hobby of cooking. But, unexpectedly, I received another invitation from my son and his wife. They wanted to treat me to dinner to celebrate my birthday and to apologize for the previous incident. With that in mind, I decided to visit my son's house once again. But there, I found myself embroiled in another unforgettable incident.
What dish is this supposed to be?
I looked at the object piled high on the plate before me, hesitating before I asked. If I had to describe it as is, I would say it resembles a lump of coal that's on fire. Anyone would think the same if they saw the small, black lump sitting atop a heap of carelessly torn raw cabbage.
Don't you recognize it? It's fried chicken. Christmas is coming up, so I thought it would be a surprise.
Believe it or not, I've been working hard to conquer my fear of deep frying. My eldest son's wife puffed out her chest as if to say, impressive, right? Upon hearing this, I sent a quick glance towards the kitchen. Despite the lingering signs of a fire incident, it seemed that a major catastrophe like last time was avoided. If my eldest son's wife, who was once terrified of frying, had managed to overcome her fears, then surely it was something worthy of praise. But then, fried chicken! I gazed down once again at the black lump before me. Upon closer examination, I could see spots that had turned a brownish hue from being fried. Perhaps she'd been overly cautious due to her fear of frying, causing it to char. Even if it was burned, it must still taste good, right? Despite my attempts at self-reassurance, it was a tough sell. But refusing to eat was not an option. Looking at my eldest son, who was nervously hanging his head beside his excited wife, I braced myself to take a bite. The true value of a dish is not in its appearance. After all, my daughter-in-law had gone to the trouble of preparing this for me. I couldn't just dismiss her effort. So, I mustered the courage to bite into the lump. Ignoring the burnt smell, I chewed. The outer shell, which felt like charcoal, made a crunching noise and crumbled, revealing the rubbery texture of the meat underneath, filling my mouth. It was a taste unlike any I've experienced before. What had she used to marinate it? It was incredibly sweet. And the burnt parts were bitter. Honestly, I wanted to spit it out right away. Despite the unpleasant taste, I somehow managed to swallow it with the help of some water and mustered up a smile. Oh, it's tasty. Probably the hardest I've ever worked to say anything in my life. My efforts seemed to pay off as my daughter-in-law beamed with joy. It's a common story on daytime TV, a mother-in-law criticizing her daughter-in-law's cooking leading to family discord. A single offhand comment from the mother-in-law can place the son in the middle of the dispute, which could lead to the breakdown of the marriage. But it seems like I've managed to dodge that bullet. Just as I let out a sigh of relief, my daughter-in-law mercilessly placed the next dish before me. She described it as a seafood soup, but seeing the raw shrimp in the overflowing green liquid, I felt a bit dizzy. Now, I find myself in the hospital, getting in for drip. My memory is a bit fuzzy for the 2 to 3 days after the dinner party, but it seems I was found collapsed at home due to severe abdominal pain and dehydration. A relative who happened to visit found me and took me to the hospital. The doctor told me it was food poisoning caused by a bacterium called Campylobacter. When asked if I'd eaten any undercooked chicken, everything fell into place. Fried chicken. Remembering that hellish texture and flavor, a shiver ran down my spine. And I became convinced. My eldest son's wife's cooking is beyond just bad. My son is in danger. Something must be done, and soon. While I was recovering, I got in touch with my son and found out he was in the hospital with food poisoning. Both husband and wife were bedridden, or so I thought. It turned out Naomi hadn't eaten any of the food she had cooked, and she was perfectly fine. Naomi doesn't eat her own cooking? I asked. I'm not sure about during the day, but she's on some sort of diet for breakfast and dinner. Always eating salads and smoothies. That's why she probably doesn't realize how disastrous her cooking is. My son explained. But she must at least taste it, right? I argued. I don't know if she doesn't taste it or if she just can't tell it's bad. Either way, I'm at a loss. He replied. So you've been eating that food all this time? It's okay to have different tastes, but it's definitely bad for your health. Why not excuse yourself from it from now on? I suggested. While giving this advice, I had a change of heart. It might be difficult. When she caused the small fire, Naomi never apologized to the end and only complained. Even if we pointed out her poor cooking skills, she might not admit her faults. Worse, she might become agitated. My son seemed to understand this as well, and laughed as if he had given up. At first, I couldn't stand the bad food and always wanted to live with you. But even if we live together now, Naomi has high pride and won't relinquish the kitchen. She even gets furious when I try to cook. I was careless and got food poisoning this time, but recently I've learned to defend myself enough to avoid being hospitalized. Don't worry, he assured me. Really? I said. Even so, there's no way it's healthy for him to keep eating food that doesn't suit his palate. As a small aid, I asked my son to bring Naomi to our home for the New Year's celebration. Many relatives would come, and it wouldn't be a problem if the number of people increased by 2. I would cook a feast with my skills. My son was happy to accept the offer, looking forward to my home-cooked meals. I'm glad. I could potentially teach Naomi some cooking under the pretense of giving her recipes for any dishes she liked. But reality took an unexpected turn. After celebrating the new year with my son and his wife who came over on New Year's Eve, I woke up in the morning to find the dishes I had prepared over several days completely changed. When I went to the kitchen and saw the catastrophe, everything went dark before my eyes. Good morning, Mom. Thank you for the delicious dinner last night. As a thank you, I helped with the New Year's celebration dishes you had prepared, Naomi said with a laugh. Helped? You mean this? This isn't a prank, I exclaimed. No way, Mom. I would never prank you. I just made a few tweaks. Party food can be boring if it's always the same, right? I thought a change like this might be good, Naomi responded, grinning innocently. I was speechless in front of her smile. But I felt like something was falling apart under me. All the dishes I had spent days preparing for today. I had procured only the freshest of ingredients. In honor of the new year, I had even splurged on some usually pricey items. Now, they were just glorified garbage. Ignoring my eldest daughter-in-law's gleeful explanations, I dug around hoping to find something, anything that was salvageable. In the end, everything I had prepared was ruined. The only things unscathed were pre-packaged foods, beverages, and a few ingredients. On top of that, there simply wasn't enough time to start all over. Kai, I hate to ask this, but can you head to any open supermarket right now and grab anything that we could serve at the table? It's New Year's Day. Chances of finding any party food left on shelves, those that usually require pre-ordering, would be slim. Even so, I just needed something, anything that could serve as a side dish. Kai, my eldest son, understanding my predicament, immediately agreed to run the errands. In the end, I managed to plate up a few dishes using the store-bought deli items and the leftover ingredients we had, successfully saving face, at least in appearances. Of course, during all this, I didn't let my daughter-in-law anywhere near the kitchen. Compared to the feast I had planned, it was pitiful, but I had no other choice. As long as we could get through today, that's all that mattered. Just as I thought that, my invited relatives started to arrive one after the other. Happy New Year! Thanks again for the invite. I've been looking forward to Emily's cooking all year. Long time no see, Kai and Naomi. How have you been? The relatives greeted each other and took their seats at the table. We began with communion wine for the toast, but soon everyone switched to their preferred beers and started eating while enjoying their conversations. They were so engrossed in their chats that no one seemed to notice the unusual dishes in front of them. My eldest daughter-in-law, who was kicked out of the kitchen early, was sulking at the table, still not quite comprehending the situation. Then she noticed that there was no plate of deli food in front of her. She looked up at me.
Mother-in-law, my portion is…
There's no portion for you. While poking at the plate in front of me, I replied curtly. The relatives, sensing the tense atmosphere, stopped their chatters. Taking advantage of the sudden attention, my daughter-in-law dramatically filled her eyes with tears and covered her face with her hands.
It's cruel not to serve me food while everyone else has theirs. This is too much, mother-in-law.
As her words suggested, in front of my daughter-in-law was only an empty glass and a lone fork. The relatives seemed to finally catch on to the situation, beginning to jeer one after another.
Oh. Is this Emily's debut as the wicked mother-in-law? All right. I'm rooting for Naomi. Mother-in-law from hell, stop your bullying. Out with the evil spirits.
Stay strong, bride. It seemed a 10% worry and 90% mischief mix. As I shrugged at the relatives, already tipsy from the booze, I realized for them, the friction between me and the eldest son's wife was nothing more than New Year's entertainment. As the host, I had to entertain the guests further, even the main instigator of this situation. The eldest son's wife was no exception. Can't be helped.
I'll bring Naomi's share too, so just wait a bit.
Resolute, I hugged the tray to my chest and returned to the kitchen. Before long, I returned to the living room with an oval platter in hand. It was a seafood platter. The relatives loved seafood. So this platter was something I had reserved a month in advance for this very day. Both the relatives and the eldest son's wife probably thought that another dish was being brought out for each of them. They were surprised by the sudden appearance of a large dish, but of course, I meant the part arranged by the eldest son's wife. But there was no way they could understand that. The eldest son's wife, in particular, looked pleased, probably thinking it was finally time to showcase the dish she had arranged.
Oh. We've been waiting. What's this, seafood as well? I was thinking there was surprisingly little variety this year.
Looks delicious, let's dig in. As soon as I set it on the table, the relatives' forks extended towards it. But, predictably, as soon as they put the seafood in their mouths, screams echoed from everywhere.
Ack! What on earth is this? Sweet seafood!
Relatives began visibly grimacing and reaching for water. That was hardly surprising. The seafood platter was heavily dressed in honey. Conceivably, a seasoned chef might successfully combine seafood and honey, but the creative touch was unfortunately added by the eldest son's wife. There was undoubtedly some other unfathomable ingredient mixed in.
Naomi tweaked the recipe for you all.
Right?
Yes. I got the idea from a maple syrup salmon poke bowl.
But it wasn't just honey. The oysters were topped with caramel sauce, and the crab was sprinkled with tiny golden pieces of paper. Upon closer inspection, they were actually pieces of origami.
It's for the New Year's celebration. Don't you often see it in full-course meals?
Well, those usually come with edible gold leaf. Not paper that can't be eaten. Seems like the relatives agreed. All of them put down their forks with strained expressions. They must have expected the dish to be met with high praise. The relatives awkwardly explained.
Naomi, you do have a sweet tooth. We, on the other hand, prefer spicy food. Naomi, you do have a sweet tooth. We, on the other hand, prefer spicy food.
While the eldest son's wife dropped her shoulders in disappointment. Next, I served the homemade roast beef. It was one of my husband's favorites and a long-standing dish in our family. However, even when I placed the large pot of it on the table, no one reached out with their forks. It made sense. No one could explain why the roast beef was stewing in a pot. Except for the eldest son's wife, of course. I found this big chunk of meat, so I decided to stew it in red wine. Doesn't it look tasty? Please, help yourselves."
So that was it. The unnaturally dark color was from the red wine. However, it was clear from the smell that the alcohol hadn't been cooked off, and the color was far from being produced by red wine alone. At least, it looked like it was mixed with powdered chili or bean paste. Or it might have been colored with paint. It wouldn't be out of character for the eldest son's wife. And it wasn't funny.
You all mentioned earlier that you like spicy food, right? This should pair well with your drinks. Go on, go on.
Having just rejected her previous dish, the relatives likely felt they couldn't escape this time. They hesitantly picked out the once roast beef from the pot and took a bite. Then, screams echoed again. From their repeated calls for water, it seemed it was too spicy this time.
This is ridiculous. What kind of a sick joke is this? This isn't fit for human consumption. Even dog food is better than this.
Finally, it seemed they had reached their limit. One after another, harsh words were hurled at the eldest son's wife. Upon witnessing the relatives' reactions, the eldest son's wife finally understood the harsh criticism her creative dish received, and she burst into tears.
You're all so cruel. I worked so hard on this. Turning mom's cooking into garbage and then complaining about it, unbelievable.
The eldest son glared at his wife in disgust. This roast beef was a dish that the eldest son often enjoyed, making his anger even more potent.
You turned it into garbage. So this was originally Emily's cooking?
That's correct. Everything on that plate is store-bought.
Naomi turned all the chicken noodle soup and party foods I prepared in advance into waste, so I had no choice but to buy these. Waste. Such a term.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I should have said poison, considering what was found next to the pot.
I held up an empty spice bottle for everyone to see. The label read nutmeg. A common spice, typically used in meat dishes. As of last night, this bottle was unopened, meaning that Naomi must have dumped the entire bottle into the pot.
Do you know? Nutmeg is a wonderful spice that can make meat dishes delicious in small amounts, but it can actually be poisonous. There have been instances of people dying from overdosing. The lethal dose is only 10 g. The most common poison, isn't it?
No way!
By the way, this bottle contains 15 g. Considering all of it was dumped into the pot, if you finished eating, it's certainly enough to invite death. Stop joking! Are you trying to send us to the hospital?
Accusations turned into shouts of anger as the reality of nearly being served poison on top of food worse than dog food set in. Overwhelmed, Naomi began crying and pleading.
But I didn't know. Nutmeg goes with meat, right? I just wanted to make it tastier. It's not my fault. Yeah, you said the same thing before. You didn't know about Campylobacter. Nobody taught you. Yeah, that's right. You never learned the basics of cooking from anyone, didn't listen to any advice, didn't even properly read a cookbook. You just cook on a whim, not even tasting your own food. That's why you end up making garbage.
At her husband's harsh words, Naomi stopped crying. She probably thought her husband would side with her. But he mercilessly called the dish garbage and turned to the relatives. He seemed still angry that the relatives had deemed me a demon mother-in-law without knowing the full story.
Now you understand why my mother didn't serve Naomi food. She ruined my mother's cooking. And she's not even remorseful about it. There's no need to prepare a decent meal for someone like that. Isn't that right? If you still side with Naomi, I will cut ties with you all here and now."
Faced with the eldest son's reasonable argument, the relatives bowed their heads in silence. As if to drive the point home, when I asked, "Would you like seconds?" and moved the meat closer, the relatives screamed, backed away, and some even fell from their chairs. As I remained silent, they eventually began to mutter apologies in dry voices. After that, the remorseful relatives ate only the original store-bought dishes, and each of them went home, each with words of apology. The eldest son's wife tried to sneak away amidst the chaos, but my son and I didn't miss it. We made sure she sat down and took responsibility for the mess she created. And of course, that meant making sure she ate her own creation. As a result, she's now in the hospital. She could only manage a few bites of any of the dishes. While it was a bit unsatisfying from my perspective, I think it was a good opportunity for her to learn just how outrageous her cooking was. Afterwards, I was left with the problem of dealing with the leftovers. After some thought, I decided to take them with me when I visited my eldest son's wife in the hospital. I figured if I showed them to her doctor, they'd understand the cause of her illness. However, I had the good fortune to bump into her parents who were also visiting. As things naturally played out, I ended up handing the leftovers to them. As a result, upon discharge, my eldest son's wife was immediately sent back to live with her parents. Her parents apologized profusely, saying things like, "We had no idea she was feeding Kai such horrible things, and we don't need any money for medical expenses. If you want to divorce, we're okay with that." So, my son and I, who had been harboring resentment all this while, finally felt like we could let it go. And as for our relatives, they lavished us with expensive meats, fine liquors, and fresh fish as an apology. When I said it was too much for me alone to eat, they suggested we start the New Year celebration anew, which made my son and I burst out laughing.
"You know, it's just not the New Year without Emily's cooking,"
they said. Those words warmed my heart. After all, the purpose of cooking is to bring joy to others. So, I will continue to hone my skills and make those who look forward to my cooking